The Trump administration has said that their goal is to end unlawful immigration into the U.S. However, their policies can affect your green card application. So let's talk about how the path to green cards has now shifted. So if you have a green card application pending or you're planning on applying for a green card, watch this video because we're going to break down how the new policies can affect your case. I am U.S. immigration attorney Lilian Chukwurah, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. When it comes to the green card process, the number one question people ask me is, how long is this process going to take? And with the new policies in place with the Trump administration, the answer to that question just got even more complicated. When it comes to a green card application process, you're filing an I-130, you may be filing an I-485 in the U.S. if your spouse is in the U.S. However, if your spouse is outside of the U.S., you'll be filing an I-130 and then a DS-260 with the embassy. With the new policies in place, I predict that the process to get from an I-130 being approved to getting your DS-260 at the embassy is going to get significantly longer. And why is this? Because the Trump administration has decided that the best way to improve the immigration system, the legal immigration system, is to fire people. Yes. USCIS officers that process I-130s for spouses of U.S. citizens, spouses of permanent residents, parents, children of U.S. citizens, that USCIS is losing officers. Again, these are officers that process these applications, and we know if you have an application pending, you know that there's a backlog and things are taking far longer than they should. This backlog got worse during COVID, but now it was starting to get back to normal, but that's about to change if the administration continues to fire people. What does this mean for your application? If you have not started your green card application process, if you have not filed your I-130, you want to go ahead and do that now and not wait. Because the longer you wait to get into the process, the longer it's going to take for your application to be approved. Because the backlog is only going to get worse if the administration keeps up their whole thing of firing people that do not need to be fired, right? Firing people and within organizations that those people are necessary for the things that he says he wants, which is legal immigration, right? So if you want legal immigration, the way to do that is to hire more people to process those applications. But instead, we are getting firings of the people that are processing those applications. Just take 1 second to let that sit in. Right? If we want legal immigration, we want people to file applications. We then need officers to process those applications. So if you fire the officers, that means it's going to take longer for a U.S. citizen filing for their spouse or a U.S. citizen filing for their parents for them to be able to come to the U.S. You are making it worse for the people that you say you're trying to protect. So if you're in a situation where you're still trying to decide whether to file that I-130 or not, it may be time to do it so that you are not waiting years and years and years for something that should only be taken a year to a year and a half. If you enter the U.S. under U4U, the Parole program for Cuba, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, if you entered into the U.S. under any of those Biden administration parole programs, and you want to get a green card through your spouse, through your adult children, listen up. Those applications, so if you're putting in your green card application, those applications are now being put on pause. There's no timeline given of when they will resume processing your green card application. Why? Because the Trump administration has decided that the people that applied for those programs, they committed fraud, right? There must be people in the program that committed fraud. And in order to root out all the fraud, they have to investigate all those cases. And they're not going to let you that went through the legal immigration system to get your parole to now have a spouse that's filing for you. They're not going to let you to complete that process of gaining your permanent residency because they think that someone that went through that program or multiple people that went through the program committed fraud. So they are punishing everyone, including spouses of U.S. citizens, children of U.S. citizens, right? Parents of U.S. citizens, in order to make this point. But here's the thing though, when it comes to green card applications, the officers are already reviewing your whole immigration history before they go ahead and approve your green card because they need to make sure that you actually qualified for the parole that you entered the U.S. with and you did not commit any fraud when you got that parole. And now you're filing through a spouse, they're going to do all that review anyway. So to punish people that are already in the process of getting their permanent residency, for people that may not even be able to gain permanent residency, is a farce. That is something that should not be happening. But if you're in that situation, just know there is a lawsuit being prepped as we speak. So there will be a lawsuit being filed. And if you are in a situation where you fall into that category where you have already filed your application and now it's on hold, just know there may be a class action lawsuit coming up that you can join. So keep that in mind. All of these things that the Trump administration is trying to do, which limits the rights of U.S. citizens to file for their spouses, those things are being challenged in court. Whether the people challenging it are going to win or not is going to depend on the court system, right? It's going to depend on the federal government. But what I can tell you is that every single Trump administration issue, executive order that has been challenged in court has been paused by the federal courts. Remember, they tried to stop birthright citizenship? There's a national ban on that right now. They cannot make that happen. So, although this is going to greatly affect you because you're filing a green card application after having entered the U.S. under a Biden administration parole program, just know there is a lawsuit, and once that lawsuit is filed, we will know if the judge is going to put a pause to that and force the federal government to continue processing your applications, or if they're going to let the lawsuit play out and then make a final decision. But for now, just know there are people out there fighting for you to make sure that you are able to still apply for your spouse that entered on the parole program, which you had to file for with USCIS and all of that. So that is the second thing that can affect your ability to get a green card for your spouse, your parents, your children. Conditional residents are now being targeted. Listen, if you are a conditional resident and you're in the process of removing your conditions, I suggest that you consult a lawyer before you file your application. Because if USCIS denies that application and you're put in immigration court proceedings, you will not be able to travel outside of the U.S., right? People that are conditional residents that have their I-751 denied and then end up in immigration court, they are not able to travel outside of the U.S. anymore. And if you travel, coming back to the U.S., CBP at the airport will send you back. So it's really important that when you are filing your I-751 application, before you get to the point of having the I-751 denied, that you are consulting a lawyer, making sure you have all your paperwork in place, making sure you meet all the requirements so that when you do go to your interview, the officer can actually approve you, and you do not have to worry about being put in removal proceedings and being potentially not able to leave the US, even though you're still technically a permanent. The Trump administration has also indicated that they will be doing extra scrutiny on every single application. So before you file your green card application, before you file your citizenship application, you need to make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's before you file, because they will be doing extreme vetting on every single case, and anything out of place will trigger a fraud investigation. They are hiring more people on the fraud investigation and less people on the adjudication side. So more people investigating fraud, and less people actually interviewing and processing applications. So what does this mean for you? This means that every single application you file, you need to make sure that you qualify for it, right? You need to make sure you have all the evidence that's required for it, and you need to make sure that you file the correct forms for the application. Because if you do not have the correct forms, if you do not have the evidence, if there's something that you get wrong in that process, USCIS is going to use it as a reason to not only investigate your case, but to deny your case. USCIS used to be the friendly organization. Under the Trump administration, it's going to get more contentious. The reason that I'm telling you this is so that you are prepared and not surprised when the officer may be contentious with you at your interview, where they may give you a harder time on things that you may think are minimal, right? Things that shouldn't even matter are going to matter now. So every single step of your application, you need to make sure that you are really on top of your game, that you are really processing your applications correctly. If you have watched any of my other videos, you know that I have talked about expedited removal and how the Trump administration is going to expand that to include more people. Well, they are doing that. And if you're filing a green card application, just know this may end up applying to you. So if you fall into a category of people that are in the expanded expedited removal process, you may end up being picked up at your interview. We have not received any word that this is happening yet, but we know this happened in the first Trump administration. So I want to warn you about it. And another reason you need to make sure you qualify for things and that you are not subject to expedited removal before going to your interview. Okay. It's not a matter of dealing with things after the fact. You want to be proactive. So before you go to your interview, you need to make sure that you are not subject to expedited removal. You need to make sure that you have things in place to protect you, to protect your spouse, your petitioner, your beneficiary before you even start the process. But if you're already at the process where you're getting ready for an interview, you need to be ready for any of the scenarios if you fall into expedited removal, because you do not know if your case is going to be flagged where ICE may be there waiting to pick you up. Again, we have not heard anything of this happening, but I do expect that this is going to happen more, especially now that they are expanding the definition and the category of people that fit under expedited removal. So, again, I'm going to, if you heard me at the beginning, I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So we have to work within the system that exists today. The system that exists today is not the same one that was here on January 19th. Okay? It is not. It has significantly changed, and we need to change accordingly. Okay. We need to process our cases differently. In my office, we handle things a lot differently, right? Before we file a case, we're taking a longer time with clients, making sure they have all their documentation before we're filing applications. Because again, if you watch the whole video, there's so many different things that can go wrong, that can trigger a fraud investigation now. That wasn't the case on January 19th. So we need to be extra careful on every single case. And if you're filing your application on your own, you need to make sure that you are really on top of your game and you are really sure of everything you're doing, because you don't want to end up in a situation where your application gets flagged and now you're dealing with a fraud investigation that is unnecessary and is just going to delay your case. Remember, the reason that I do these videos are not to scare you, but to inform you, because every single time USCIS makes these shifts or US immigration changes, we want to be prepared for it. We want to know what those changes are, and we want to know how to protect ourselves, right? That's always the goal. So if you're watching this video and you're scared, I am so sorry. That was not my goal. My goal was to inform you so that now that you're informed, you can take action to make sure that you do not fall into any of these traps that they are creating. If you are applying for a green card or citizenship and you would like a strategy session to figure out if you have any of these issues, or if you want someone to look over your situation and tell you what you can qualify for, what you should be applying for, all of those things, go ahead and schedule a strategy session with me. You can schedule that on my website, lilylegal.com. Click on contact us and you can select a date and time that works best for you for us to speak. Thank you for watching and stay safe out there.